All right, good day, everyone. Thanks for being here for another dive into the Gospel of Thomas, where we're going through this very methodically, very, not rushing anything to discover why was this book removed from the biblical collection? Why does mainstream religion not really acknowledge this very much? And what can we glean from that? So this is a continuation. We're on part 4. And if you want to start from the beginning, make sure to review the other parts. I posted the YouTube playlist of the other 3 parts in the share post. And yeah, we're just going to pick up from where we left off last time. And this is a open discussion, so if you find something within the text that we're reading, make sure to share it. If you see some extra insight or have a question about what we're reviewing, feel free to jump in and speak about it. Just a request to keep the conversation on topic, though. I do want to be focused here on the text itself. So, it is all encompassing. There's a lot related to it, but let's just make sure we keep it centered here. So yeah, I'm grateful to be joined, as always in this series, by my brother, Darth Vader. So thanks for being here today. Yeah, do you have any words to start us off with?
Nope.
Awesome. Cool. Well, we'll just jump right into the text itself, and I'm going to share screen as I have done in the past, and we're just going to read it together. So yeah, here we go. Let me pull this one up. And I did post I have been posting the version of the text that we're reviewing. So if you want to read along yourself, feel free to use that. And it's not very long, so you could easily print this out at yourself or for a little cost, especially if you exclude some of the Aramaic or what's the language that this was in?
Coptic?
Yeah, the Coptic language that this is reviewed in as well. You could easily print it out with not too many pages. So yeah, I think this is where, let me just review and see where we left off. I think we got past this part.
44.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds about right. Be passers-by, I remember that. The Judeans, I remember that. We did 44. Yes, so 45. We'll start here. So Ieshua said, "Grapes are not picked from thorn bushes, nor figs from thistles, for they do not give fruit. The good offer goodness from the secret of their heart. The perverse offer perversity from the secret of their heart. That which is expressed is what overflows from the heart." So this is very similar to "Ye shall know them by their fruit," the teachings in Matthew. And yeah, it's just said very simply, very succinctly here that the good fruit, the grapes and the figs, they don't grow from the thorn bushes or the thistle. They don't grow from these non-fruit bearing plants, which is an allegory for us and the sort of energy that we give off. So he distinguishes the good offer goodness from the secret of their heart. The perverse offer perversity from the secret of our heart. Both of them are from the secret of the heart, or from the innermost sanctum of that. And so that's what he's saying here, is that's how you can know the difference. You'll know them by their actions. So it's important to recognize this, because it's much simpler to pretend that you're good. But sooner or later, if somebody is just pretending, it's going to show itself through their actions. So somebody can say things all the time and put on a good face and virtue signal and all of that, but through their actions will reveal the true contents of their heart. Because we can't truly know what somebody is thinking or what's within them. So that's the way to sort of distinguish and see what comes forth. So yeah, I think it's a pretty simple, straightforward one, but good to reflect on and very important to review as well. So yeah, what else do you see here?
Okay, so Ieshua says grapes would be the produce of the Christic spirit. Okay, so grapes are not picked from thorn bushes. Thorn bushes would be a reference to false Christic people that claim to be of a Christian nature, but they aren't really. So that's what the thorn bushes would be. Nor figs from thistles. Figs from thistles is a reference to the old Mosaic law and the old system of worship of Judaism, because Christ was not a Yahwehist. Uh, even in the Christian scriptures that the worldly people, I shouldn't say it that way, even in modern Christian scriptures, modern Western Christian scriptures, Jesus speaks very harshly of Yahweh, and he says that my father is not your father, and that your father is the devil, and that's in every Bible. Okay, so he's saying that grapes, you can't get them from fake people, and you can't get figs from thistles. That's the Mosaic law or Judaism, because they do not give fruit. Because the God of the Old Testament was a jealous God, bringing upon the error upon the sons and the grandsons and the third generation and fourth generation. He was a jealous God, exacting exclusive devotion, and that's not what the Christ Spirit is all about. Then he says, the good offer goodness from the secret of their heart. And the secret of the heart is that that's where Christ comes through. Christ is not a product of the mind, it's a product of the heart. And then the evil offer perversity from the secret of their heart. And the secret is that they're materialistic creatures. See, the goodness in Christ originates from heaven. Absolute divinity, that's a heavenly ideal that doesn't originate from the materialistic realm. So those that are perverse, they see only with their physical eyes. They don't see with spiritual eyes. And when it says that which is expressed as well overflows from the heart, it's saying that someone who's materialistic in nature and they're not able to access to Christ in their heart, it prevents them from seeing the mystery. It prevents them from peering into spiritual ideals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. All right. And then moving on to verse 46, Ieshua said, from Adam to John the Baptist, no one born of woman is higher than John the Baptist. Thus his eyes will not be destroyed. But I have said, whoever among you becomes small will know the kingdom and be higher than John. So this is another thing that is said in the book of Matthew, and it often leads to confusion within sort of the mainstream interpretation of it. A lot of people have their speculations about it. I see this as John the Baptist representing sort of the physical reality, and the because he was the Baptist, so he sort of embodies the baptism of water. And the baptism of water is purity of the body. And it's almost essential to have purity of the body, at least to some degree, in order to raise yourself, in order to elevate oneself past this space. However, that's not the end point. It's not just to have purity of the body and leave there. So John the Baptist is the greatest of those because he represents that purity of the body. But I have said, whoever among you becomes small will know the kingdom and be higher than John. So if John the Baptist is the greatest of the body, he perhaps represents the throat chakra, or that crossing point from going from the 5 lower chakras to the 2 higher. And so whoever among you becomes small, and this is similar to better for a camel to thread the eye of the needle than a rich man to enter into heaven. This is this becoming small, becoming humble, becoming meek, bowing in penitence, but also physically representative of leaving the physical realm and becoming small or immaterial to energetically pass the physical realm, going into the heavenly realms, which would be represented by the sixth and seventh chakras. So, and that's the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is within, and it is, it represented within these two higher chakras. So, whoever among you becomes small will know the kingdom and be higher than John, because you raise yourself past the fifth and become the sixth, and then the seventh is bestowed upon you if you stay in that space of humility. So that's what I see from this one, but there could be a whole lot more. So what you got here?
So I'm going to be honest, the part about it being no one superior to John the Baptist, there's no consensus on what that means. But the other part about his eyes not being destroyed, that's a reference to spiritual sight, saying that John the Baptist had acquired this spiritual sight. That's why he was a prophet. That's why he was able to reveal spiritual things. And that's why even kings were inquiring as to his vision and his opinion into matters, because he had acquired his eyes. And John the Baptist had in my opinion, and this is just me saying this, it was saying that John the Baptist had acquired the highest state of ascension while maintaining the physical form. So no one's higher than him. He has reached the highest state that can be reached. There isn't any above it. However, whoever becomes small like a child, okay, releasing the ego, can become even higher than John. So, and this mirrors the statement that Jesus Christ saying that his followers would accomplish even greater things than him. So like, what does it even mean to be the Christ? So to be the Christ meant to be so there were people that were a Christ, and then there were people that were the Christ. So to be a Christ simply means that you're anointed by the Spirit, that you've achieved a spiritual stature and a spiritual standing, and you can see with spiritual eyes and hear with spiritual ears and do things with spiritual hands. That's someone that lives and breathes and acts in the spiritual realm while maintaining a physical form. That's a Christ. To be the Christ is to be the focal point of that ideal. So John the Baptist had achieved that spirit anointing, and it was as high as anyone could get at that time. However, Jesus Christ was saying, we're going to achieve even greater things than the state that John the Baptist had achieved. That's my understanding it, reading it with occult eyes.
Yeah, that fits as well.
But that's just my opinion.
Right. Yeah, no, I like that. All right, and then we'll go to 47, verse 47, which in English gematria, that is John 47. Ieshua said, "A man cannot ride 2 horses, nor bend 2 bows. A servant cannot serve 2 masters, for he will honor one and disdain the other. No one drinks an old wine and then desires a new one. New wine is put into old wineskins, for they will crack. Old wine is not put into new skins, for it will spoil. A patch of old cloth is not sewn onto a new garment, for it will tear." So, yeah, a lot packed into this one. This is reminiscent of several verses within the book of Matthew. And the first part, a man cannot ride 2 horses nor bend 2 bows. A servant cannot serve 2 masters, for he will honor one and disdain the other. So this is reflective of just simply put, if we are serving mammon, if we are serving the physical reality, if that's our God, if money is our God, if material wealth is our God, if any false idol that we put up is our God, then we cannot serve the one true God, which is that highest goodness, because that transcends anything that is physical. So you can't be halfway in one and the other. If you're not serving one, you are inevitably serving the other. So that's it's a very sort of abrupt, contrasting perspective to, especially from this modern day religious lens, where the Catholic Church has all this wealth and riches and is all about material and these costumes and identities and rituals and things, and yet they claim to serve the one true God in word. But if they're living that way, how can that be? So that's a pretty simple, straightforward put out there, that, hey, if you're not giving your all to that highest quality of goodness, then you're serving the other. And it's not something that, it's very challenging to maintain that at all times, of course. So it's not to beat ourselves up if we find ourselves in spaces where we find ourselves, paying too much attention to money or material possessions, or worrying about things in the physical. That happens, but it's a opportunity to reevaluate that and to come back to that and trust that highest goodness is what we serve. And that's that. So, I don't know if we want to pause on that portion and then just keep going, because there's kind of there's two different main segments I see here. So as far as this first portion, do you want to speak on that?
Okay, so the first portion is, a man cannot ride two horses nor bend two bows, and a servant cannot serve two masters, for you'll honor one to disdain the other. So the two horses has to do with kingdoms. So there's the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth. And why are they considered two separate things? Because they're two separate realms. The kingdom of heaven has to do with the cause, and the kingdom of earth has to do with the effect. So you can live life operating at the state of cause, or you can live life at the state and dealing with the effects. So an example of that would be like a drunk. So the drunk is always driving drunk, and he gets into accidents, or he's worried about getting pulled over, and he gets pulled over and he worries about his breath, and he worries about his eyes, puts on some sunglasses, chews some gum. Well, he's dealing with the effect. But a wise person would deal with the cause, which is not to drive drunk, right? So, and in the spiritual sense, so that's like a physical example. The spiritual example would be that you can live at the spiritual realm where you are vibrating the idea of prosperity. And because of that, you're manifesting prosperity into your life, and then you get to exist at that level. Or you can live at the physical level where you're not vibrating any specific frequency, you're not attracting any specific state. And if you're not building that up, then you're going to exist in a low state. And so now you have to live with the idea of poverty, and you always have to be scrounging around and jury rigging things and scraping together resources. Well, it's better to reside in heaven and deal with the cause, root of the situation, and manifest the states that you want. So all of this has to do, because these are all marching instructions. If you go back into last week's lessons, Jesus Christ was saying that, or Ieshua was saying that he was sending a sword into the earth, and he was giving his followers marching orders. So this is all military instructions. So we can wage war at the spiritual level, or we can wage war at the physical level. And a servant can't serve two masters, because there are two different methodologies and ways of thinking completely. You're either going to live at the spiritual level, or you're going to and disdain the physical, or you're going to live at the physical and disdain the spiritual. And we see that all the time with people, where you try to explain to someone, listen, there's this thing, the law of attraction, you have to operate in unity with the Father, and they just disdain it, and they don't believe it, and they reject it, and they'd rather go out and work physically And okay, so they get to that, they chose their horse, and they are rejecting spiritual principles. You can't do both, because they're opposed. They're opposed to each other.
Yeah, it's two completely different vantage points. You're viewing reality from an outside in perspective, if you're only paying attention to the effects and what's happening around you, and like, oh, if this all happened, then I would be happy. If I had this, and this, then I would be happy. Then I would be satisfied. Or flipping it from that spiritual perspective, taking it within, inside out. We are the projectors in this reality. Then you can adjust. No, I begin with that state. I begin with how I am, and the rest follows. But I can't just intellectually think that. It has to be a full embodiment. It has to be that full taking that leap of faith and trusting, which is extremely challenging. But that's what he's inviting, and that's the Christic way, is as embodying that at all times, or as best as we can. And that follows into what he says in the next lines of, no one drinks an old wine and then desires a new one. You don't put new wine into old wineskins, because they crack. Old wine, put it into new skins, for it will spoil. And you don't continually trying to patch up old cloth, or an old piece of cloth onto a new garment, for it will tear, because there has to be congruency. Everything has to fit together. And if there's not congruency, if it's only believed intellectually but not emotionally and spiritually, then there's no congruency. It's not going to align together, and there's going to be misalignment. It won't work. So it has to be every layer of that. And we can't expect to have that spiritual flow move into us if we haven't taken care of our old wineskin. We have to address that layer of us in order for us to truly receive that. So I see it as, it's like he's inviting a pragmatic approach of introspection, and not putting the cart before the horse. And just because some spiritual idea sounds good on paper, or it sounds attractive, we have to review the fullness and wholeness of self. And this comes from physical purity, mental, emotional, spiritual, all levels of it. And we're all going to be at varying levels within that. So it has to be done in balance. So that's kind of what I get out of this one.
So no one who's been drinking the old wine is the Mosaic law. They didn't like the new law. That's why most of the Jews rejected Christianity. See, the thing about the Mosaic law is that you were proved righteous by your works, and you were proved righteous by your following the Mosaic law, and you were proved righteous by your sacrifices to the physical temple. So you could be an absolutely horrid, rotten, disgusting, filthy person and be a good Jew. You could follow the Mosaic law, great, and they were violating the true spiritual law. So no one that was invested into that old system wanted anything to do with Christ's new teachings. It's kind of like the old bankers and the new cryptocurrency. The old bankers hate this new idea of open source public blockchain ledger technology, because the old technology and the old teachings had a centralization of power that you could use to control and bring poverty onto the people. But the new system frees people. So there's kind of like a financial parallel to this teaching.
Definitely.
And if you put the new wine, that's the new Christian teachings, or not modern Western Christian teachings, but if you put the new wine, the new spirit of Christ, and you put it into those old people, they'd crack. And if you put the old wine into the new skins, it would spoil. So the old wine is the Mosaic law, and the new skins is the new Christian family. And this is exactly what happened, is that the Apostle Paul, because originally what Christ taught and what the Mosaic law taught were two separate things, okay? But what the Apostle Paul did is he bonded the two faiths together, and it created the Catholic Church, which was a spoilization of the teachings of Christ. See, the teachings of Christ was not supposed to have a centralization of power. Everyone was supposed to access to Christ through their own heart. But when you put the Mosaic law into the new Christians, well, then it perverted it and it spoiled the whole thing, both the student and the teachings. And then a patch of old cloth is not put onto a new garment. So the garment is your persona. It's your ego. It's who you identify as. And if you put the old teachings into the new students, it says it will tear. And what it means by that, it will tear, that it'll form a new religion. And Christ didn't want a new religion started. He wanted genuine, true spirituality, and not a new legalistic, because that's what the Mosaic law was. It was very legalistic, and that's not what Christ wanted. So he said what was going to happen, and it did happen.
Yeah, I like that. Thank you. All right, so verse 48, Ieshua said, if two make peace with each other in a single house, then they can say to the mountain, move, and it will move. Does it continue? Nope, that's it.
I think that's the end of that idea.
Yeah. So Ieshua said, if two make peace with each other in a single house, then they can say to the mountain, move, and it will move. So essentially saying, if we're each these magnificent, pure magical beings, aspects of the Creator, and part of what makes this experience so enthralling and captivating is this experience of separation. And that's the only way that this experience can exist, is if we forget who we are and go through the process of remembering. That's the only way that I can have this contrasting element to actually have this experience even exist. But the magic can really happen when these seemingly separated elements of self come back together. So when there's a harmony within these two, because we're each sort of like singing our own song, right? The melody is moving at its own pace. The beat, the rhythm is happening in its own way. And it's wonderful in that sense. But how much more wonderful when two of those songs can create a harmony, can come together in a way that those two very powerful resonances can harmonize and emit a frequency that's congruent. So this is represented with the sacred sex and the divine union between masculine and feminine, both within oneself, because we all have these two elements within ourselves, but then take it another step with another. And this can happen with all sorts of relationships, to create that harmony in that way. And in the other book, Ieshua said, where two or more are gathered, I'm there. That's the sort of magic that can happen when we start to harmonize in that way. We can literally move mountains, and that can, of course, we can look at that physically, literally, and there's nothing that can't happen from that perspective. But the mountain is also just a reference to anything of magnitude, anything that would seem impossible with just one. So that's what I get there.
Okay. The way I understand it is that this verse 48 is a continuation of verse 47, because he was talking in verse 47, he was talking about the old law system versus the new law of the Christ, and how we had to be on guard that the old Mosaic law lawyers and the legal system and the Pharisees and the Sadducees, we had to keep them out of the new Christian arrangement. But then he says, well, if the two can make peace with each other into a single house, if we could get people that were from the old Mosaic law, and if we can get them to reside in the body of Christ peaceably, then they would be able to say to the mountain, and the mountain he's talking about is the mountain that the old temple of Jerusalem was on. That's where he was when he was actually teaching this. So he's saying, if we can get these people that are following the Mosaic law, if we can make peace with them, and we can get them to enter into the body of Christ peaceably and get them to let go of the old Mosaic law, then we would be able to say to the temple, go away, the old religious system, go away, and it would have to flee from us. So this was a battle strategy of how to defeat the Yahwehists.
Yeah, cool.
And then the secondary, because there's usually a secondary meaning to some of this stuff. So the secondary meaning to this also is, if you can, so it's one thing to live from an earthly materialistic viewpoint, and most people, that's where they are. Okay. And they kind of ignore heaven, they ignore the occult, they ignore spiritual principles, and they're at odds with it. Okay. And then there are other people that reside purely in the spirit realm, and they don't do very well in the physical realm. They kind of struggle, they're a little odd. A lot of times they have to operate outside the system, and because they're completely ignoring the physical realm. And that's okay too, right? But if someone can unify and they can reside in both worlds without violating the rules of either, and they can take the materialistic nature within them and subjugate it to the spiritual nature and put things in order, then, because they're not at war with heaven, and they're not at war with earth, okay, and they've brought it all into a single house, then they can say to any physical mountain, move, and that mountain would have no recourse. It couldn't appeal to the earth, and it couldn't appeal to heaven. It would have to obey. And this is kind of like the idea that if you can get all 7 chakras within you unified and pulling in the same direction, then the amount of spiritual force that you're able to exert is laser-like and focused, because all the energies are agreeing with each other and pulling toward a single goal. So that's the secondary meaning to this.
Right. Yeah, the red shift, blue shift working congruently, both layers of self-physicality and metaphysicality. And that's what we at our highest level represent, is that union, or that union point, the merging between heaven and earth. So when those two colors, red and blue, come together at the middle, you walk the middle path, which is green, and when you mastered the middle path, you end up merging these two colors to make the purple, or the indigo, or the violet rather. And that's the highest movement within this space, because you've mastered both physicality and metaphysicality. Yeah,
that's this idea is also used in marriage, or even just with internal yoga. If you can get the male force and the female force to operate in unity, then their power is amplified at the exponential state. But if they're separate, then the power is diluted and much weaker. Even if they're not at war with each other, but see, the absence of war is not necessarily peace either, because peace is unity, right? And so, like, even if you have like the two energies, and they're kind of like, I don't know what's the way to put it, where they're working together because they have to, but they aren't really unified. I mean, they're still accomplishing more than if there was outright war between the two of them. But if they're really unified, and once again, they can actually move a mountain.
Yeah, it's discord versus harmony.
Yeah.
I mean, yoga means union. So that's what that practice truly is about. It's not some exercise where you go in a room with stretchy pants and, sweat out, which I'm not knocking, can certainly be helpful. But yoga at its highest form is really about that union, to use the breath as that representation of the exhale and the inhale, where both of them are working congruently and harmonized to bring in that unionized representation of you, which is all that you are. You just forget sometimes. So we'll move on to verse 49. Ieshua said, "Blessed are you, the whole ones and the chosen ones. You will find the kingdom, for you came from there and you will return." So he's not saying, he's just putting it very simply, sort of following up on that verse as well. The whole ones and the chosen ones, same thing, just stepping into your true self, realizing the nature of this separation experience and what it's there for, and enjoying the process of bringing them back together, because that's where the kingdom is. And you truly never left that space. We just imagined we did. So we came from there and we will return. And it's not a physical place that we go to. It's not some far off distant planet that we beam off to. It's right here, right now, waiting, inviting, yearning for us to return.
So Yeshua says, "Blessed are you, the whole ones." So the whole ones, there's a few meanings for that. One, they're solitary because they're whole all by themselves. So they don't need others to validate their actions. They don't need others to think for them. They have their mind intact, and so they can make a decision by themselves. They can act unilaterally, right? So earlier in this book, Christ was saying to be separate, not to form churches, not to form massive organizations, but to walk the solitary path like the monk soldier. And so he's saying, "Blessed are you, the whole ones," being apart from religious establishment, and also they're whole and that they've achieved atonement or at one-ment. They are one with who they really are, the Christ within. And they're the chosen ones because they were chosen by Christ to have this truth revealed. And they were chosen by the Spirit because if you're not worthy, then it doesn't matter how hard you strive. It's like a tree. A tree cannot make the lightning strike it. The tree might even be taller than all the other surrounding environment, and still lightning might not strike it. Lightning might strike a lesser tree, right? So you have to be chosen by the Spirit. I know in my own personal case, I had to strive for years and years and years, and I got it wrong so many times. And it was a painful process. And then one day, so that's what it means to be chosen. It says you came to find the kingdom. The kingdom is within. So you came to find the gates to heaven, which is in the heart. And it says, "For you came from there." So the world came and springs from a way of thinking called the way, right? It's just the way. This is just the way Spirit works, separate from any name, because any name you give to that way would be less than what it actually is. So the world springs from the occult, and then the religions come and they bunch people together and they take their atonement and their oneness, and then they hide the keys to the kingdom, and they don't go in themselves and they don't let anyone else go in, and they hide the truth of Spirit in the heart. They hide it behind all these different symbols and metaphors and conceal it. However, those that have achieved atonement and they're whole and they've been chosen, they can return back to that kingdom. They can return back to operating by Spirit.
Yep. All right, and then verse 50, Ieshua said, if they ask you from where you come, say, we were born of the light. There where light is born of light, it holds true and is revealed within their image. If they ask you who you are, say, we are its children, the beloved of the Father, the living one. If they ask you what is the sign of the Father in you, say, it is movement, it is repose. So I see this as kind of, just it's very reflective of today, and as always, where your worth by society is given by your status and where you're from and what your job is and your lineage and all of that. And all that does when of course there's nothing wrong with having all of those things and being, happy with where you come from and all of that. But when it becomes your whole identity and that's what you build your whole being off of, then that's deviating away from our true essence further, and we're strengthening that character, that identity, which makes it much more challenging to step into who we truly are. So he's giving some responses to offer his disciples when they're asked these questions, because this is the truth of the matter, and it's beyond anything that is physical. So just some sort of simple answers in that sense. So we were born of the light, there where light is born of light. So the source, the creative source of all. This whole experience is light manifest in various frequencies to appear physical in all sorts of ways, but it's all frequencies. It's all light. So wherever that source, and it's not really aware, it just is. That's where we were born. That's where we come from, because we are that. It holds true and is revealed within their image. So when we embody this Christic way and recognize, because that's all it is just a recognition of what is and who we truly are. So when we recognize that we are that light, then it holds true and is revealed within their image. If they ask who you are, say, we are its children, the beloved of the Father, the living one. God is the God of the living. So that life is the light. It's no accident that those two words are very similar. They have the same root, because light is life. And if they ask you what is the sign of the Father, and you say it is movement and it is repose. Repose. I can't quite remember what that word means.
Repose means tranquility.
Tranquility. So stillness. It is movement and it is stillness. So the union between these two. So the perpetual movement of the mother and the perpetual stillness of the Father, and the balance point between. So that makes perfect sense as well, because we are that union between these two seemingly opposite forces, which the friction between these two is the sacred sex, is what creates all of creation. So he's just giving a good answer for that.
Usually in occult thinking, movement is a masculine term, and then repose or the stillness is a feminine term. And it comes from like the sex act. Usually it's supposed to be the man that's performing more of the motion and the penetrative act, whereas the woman defeats the man through her yielding of it. And she continues to yield until all of his movement is spent. So sometimes motion can be a feminine thing and tranquility can be a masculine thing. But in Eastern occult thinking, usually it's transposed to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is interchangeable, just as everything can be, because I could easily see the opposite being the sense in that she's the continuous dancer. That's why the womanly figure is curvaceous and moving, whereas his figure is more straight and aligned. He's more dedicated to that forward thinking, trailblazing path forward, whereas she's much more visionary and open to all paths and all ways. So yeah, it could go either way.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to track sometimes, because sometimes an attribute will be masculine sometimes, and then other times it'll be feminine. So like they say, so you have time and space. So time is the masculine attribute, and then space is the feminine attribute. So that's why a woman always wants a man's time, and then the man always wants the woman's form or the shape or space of her. So, but yeah, it all lines up. I think it's also where it says it is movement and it is repose. So when they ask, well, how do we know that the Father is in you? Well, it's by the fact that we can move, because the Father gives us movement. He gives us will. He gives us power to move and the will to move. And then it's repose in the fact that, yes, we're able to move, but on the inside, we're still having tranquility. So there are lots of people that they can move, but they don't have tranquility because they don't have the faith to move. Because they don't have the faith to operate in this world. So because they haven't become one with heaven and earth, they're in a state of turmoil. So they have a Father, they have a source, and we can tell that because they're moving, but they don't have the repose part. And so that's one of the things that we can identify someone with the Christic spirit, is that they're taking action in this world and they're getting things done, but at the same time they maintain that inner tranquility. They have the repose part.
Cool. Yeah, and then moving on to verse 51, his disciples said to him, "When will the dead be at rest? When will the new world come?" He answered them, "What you are waiting for has already come, but you do not see it." So, yeah, it's already here. It's not a destination that we reach. It's a frequency that we embody, step into rather. It's already here. We are just not worthy, if you will, of inhabiting it continuously. But it's not like it's not here. It's available for us at any time. We are not able to see it in this state. But that's, shifting, and that's part of the process. So yeah, that's all I see there.
So when will the dead be at rest? That's a reference to those that are spiritually dead, because they're operating only in the physical realm, which is subject to entropy and decay. So everyone that originates, and they originate from the physical realm, because the physical realm, well, hold on, let me go back to the verse before, verse 50. He says that light is born of light. So that's a spiritual concept, that your destination is almost always your origin. So because the physical realm originates out of death. See, before you're born, you're dead. You're not alive before you're born. So at one point you're not alive, and then now you are alive, but you originated from not being alive. So you have to return to that. So that's why from the Christic point of view, if you're a fleshly physical being, then basically you're dead, because you're not animated by the Father above. You don't have the repose. So when will all these people that are physical, when are they going to finally rest? When are they going to get their repose? When are they going to calm down? When is this new world that's going to be the product of Christ's teachings? When is that going to come? And he's saying that what you're waiting for already came. So the original Mosaic law, as transmitted by Moses, had a lot of spiritual ideals in it, but then it was perverted and the keys were taken away and they were hidden. So he's saying, listen, this teaching that I'm giving you, it's already here. It's been here a long time. You just didn't see it. And that's why you didn't recognize it. And then the secondary meaning is because the spiritual person, because a spiritual person's a creator. They're someone who manifests. And so they learn to see what it is they want as though it was real, and they will things into existence. So he's saying, because you're not manifesting it, that's how come you're not seeing it in your physical eyes. So somebody like Christ, like, okay, so we're talking about like turning water into wine, right? So the Christ, obviously he can see that it's water, but then he can choose to see the wine in it. He can choose to visualize wine, and he can choose to bring that out of the spiritual realm, and then eventually his physical eyes see it. But a physical person, they can't see the occult. They can't see what's in heaven. They can't bring that out of heaven, and so they'll never see that wine. To them, the water will always be water. So it's a lesson for us to that the keys, the truth about heaven, the Father, which is the occult, that which is not revealed, that information has always been there, and it will always be there, and there's no successful way to absolutely hide it. I mean, you can bury it, but for those that are chosen, it comes to them. And if you want that new world, if you want to create a new world for yourself personally, and you want to apply that knowledge, and you want to change the way things are, you have to learn to see things with your spiritual eyes, so that you can bring things out of heaven and bring them here to earth. Snap your fingers and make everything switch and change to be the way that you need it to be. But if you're always just looking with your physical eyes and thinking that, well, this is just the way things are, well, then you're never going to see it.
Yep.
Because heaven's actually more real than earth. There was a time when the earth didn't exist. There was just heaven, because it hadn't been manifested yet. So heaven does not need the earth, but the earth needs heaven, because the earth is the effect, but heaven is the cause.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
These are marching orders.
Yep.
To push back the darkness.
Yes.
But you have to start first with the world that you're in. You change your world first, and then from that position of strength, then you can change the world. It's like when you're going to enter into a new territory to wage war with it, you have to build a fort first. You have to build a fortification. And then once you've established a fortification, then you can take control of the territory around it. And then from there, then you can march on the rest of the world and take over the entire continent or the entire realm if you wish to do so. But first, you have to establish that beachhead.
Yep. All right. And then verse 52, his disciples said to him, 24 prophets have spoken in Israel, and they all spoke of you. He said to them, you have disregarded the living one who is in your presence, and you have spoken of the dead. So, well, just possibly this is referring to with 24. 24 is a esoteric number, often representing alchemy. So it could be referring to that. 24 is also 12 times 2, and 12 is often representative of the process, the 12 zodiac, the 12 that we go through. But then just reading the verse, 24 prophets have spoken in Israel, and they all spoke of you. He said to them, you have disregarded the living one who is in your presence, and you have spoken of the dead. So essentially, he's saying that you're seeking external validation for you're not acting in faith. You need somebody else to give the to authenticate what you're hearing and what you're seeing, the living one, the Christ. And so he's, I mean, that's essentially what he's rebuking them, or sort of just, admonishing them to some degree of saying you're speaking of the dead. You're requiring some external validation, so you're not truly living within. You're operating from that outside in reality instead of the inside out. So you can't serve two masters, and they're serving the other.
That's exactly what it's talking about, because the modern Western Christians are operating backwards. They are having the Bible validate the condition of their hearts, but Christ is not in the Bible. Okay, what I mean to say is that, like, an actual real dog is not in the word dog, right? It's like if your kid asks, "Hey, Dad, I want a puppy." You don't write the word puppy on a paper and then give it to him. Oh, good, now you've got a puppy. He's not going to be happy with that, right? So the essence of Christ is not in the Bible. See, God cannot be contained by a book. And if God could be contained by a book, do you really think they would have allowed you to have it? And if God is in the Bible, why is everyone still sleeping, right? So it's not the Bible that validates the heart. It's Christ in the heart that validates the Bible. See, there's an order of ideas here. And so they're going back to him, and they're saying, "Hey, listen, there's the Mosaic law and all these Mosaic prophets. They spoke about you, and it's true, they did. But that's not the point." He's saying you're still trying to live by the old system. And he just finished telling them about the wine. It's like he says, don't argue amongst themselves. And what do? They argue about who's the greatest. So they're still missing the point because they were still living. They hadn't acquired their spirit eyes yet.
Yep.
But they would.
Yep.
And we all here will too, eventually. If we do the work. It's kind of silly.
Yeah. Well, it's nice to have these contrasting elements. As I can imagine maybe he got annoyed quite often, but I am grateful that they provided these contrasting elements, because we need them in order to move through this in that way. If it was
it's nice too to see that even the apostles failed repeatedly.
Yeah.
I know it makes me feel better about my own failures, of which there were many. So.
Yeah, exactly. So moving on to verse 53. His disciples asked him, "Is circumcision useful or not?" He replied, "If it were useful, fathers would engender sons both born circumcised from their mothers. Rather, it is the circumcision in spirit that is truly useful." Now, this is big. This is big with all of this religious nonsense of genital mutilation of little boys, and how that became this satanic blood ritual, which is really all it is, became a normalized practice within society, where good people, ignorance of what this came from, were just willingly handing over their child, betraying their child in the youngest and most delicate, innocent stages, to be harmed in the most painful ways possible. So they're asking him from a physical perspective, looking at it from the practices at the time. Is it useful? And he says, if it were useful, you'd come like that. You think God is going to make you accidentally? You think he's going to mess up your form and create you with something that you don't need, that you have to have surgically cut off of you? So he's saying, he's showing very clearly that this circumcision that they've twisted purposefully and then ignorantly to use for this satanic ritual. It's not a physical thing. Circumcision in spirit, that is truly useful. It's not a physical attribute. We cross circumcision. It's a crossing point. So circumcision of the spirit is to cross over from that which is purely physical into that which is spiritual, and then enhance that union point. So to be circumcised has nothing to do with mutilating genitals. It has everything to do with the spiritual growth.
Yeah, you nailed it. So with a circumcision, you're cutting something off. So a circumcision in spirit is you're cutting off all the things that this religious world puts on top of you. So you're born and you're given a social security number, and you're given a religion, and you're given a political viewpoint, and you're given an education viewpoint, and you're given a social status viewpoint, and none of this stuff is real. The only thing that's real is that you're a child of God. The only thing that's real is your relationship to your mother and father and your siblings. The only thing that's real is that you're a manifestation of divine principles, and that you're the union between heaven, which is our father and our son, and earth, which is our mother and our daughter. And we're the manifestation of those divine principles. That's the only thing that's real. All that other stuff is just added on as a cultural tradition and as a weapon against the Father. And so as we mature, we have to learn to cut that stuff off. And then we can become useful to the Father and to the Mother. So yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, and it becomes it's not a one and done thing. It's a cyclical process. It happens. We can look at it from a yearly basis or a moment to moment when we start to grow attached to things and we start to pour too much attention into physical identity, possession, whatever. Then it's time to circumcise that. It's time to cut that away. And we can use the yearly cycle, with the winter being that time to cut away so that we can spring to new life with that levity, or not. Or it can be moment to moment, when we find ourselves growing too attached, having some expectation that it has to be a certain way, that we've come up with this grand plan. I've made this big business plan and it has to go this certain way, and I've put all these people in place and pieces in place. But if we keep beating our heads, if it's not working that way and we keep beating our heads against it, then the divine's asking us to perhaps let that go in some way or another. And so we're not really useful unless we're willing to let that go, to be in that flow that creation is inviting us to do. So yeah, pretty straightforward there. And then moving on to 54, blessed are you, the poor, for yours is the kingdom of heaven. So this is kind of following up on that, in that if we are non-attached, if we are not bound to our physical possessions, it doesn't mean that we can't have them. It doesn't mean that we don't need to live in abundance, but it's your attachment to them. So if you are truly willing to let all of that go, then that's the only way that you can enter the kingdom of heaven. If you're holding on to any of that, then you won't. It's just as simple as that.
So most modern Christians will look at this scripture from a strictly material wealth viewpoint. Happy are those that don't have money. But Jesus Christ here was probably most likely talking about those that didn't have religious prestige, those that weren't of the Pharisees and Sadducees class or of the priestly class, because those people, their ego was tied up in the Mosaic law, and their viewpoint of themselves was tied up in the position of the religion. And so they had a lot to give up in order to accept this new Christic idea that everyone was equal. So, but those that didn't have any position in the old religion, it was easier for them to accept Christ's teaching because they didn't have any ego to get in the way. And that was one of the objections that the Pharisees complained about Christ, is that his disciples were unlettered and of the common people. They actually had a word for them, Amarat, or people of the dust, or people of the dirt, or the cursed ones, similar to Goyim. So Christ found more productivity and more fertile earth among the common people that weren't in positions of prestige. Though he did try to bear witness to some of the upper class, and there were many people. I don't know about many, but there were several individuals that are even mentioned in the Christian Greek scriptures that responded to the message, like Nicodemus. Though he didn't openly accept Christ initially, he did so in secret for fear of losing his position. But later on, he did openly become a Christian.
And then verse 55, Ieshua said, "Whoever cannot free themselves from their father and their mother cannot become my disciple. Whoever cannot free themselves from their brother and sister and does not bear their cross as I do is not worthy of me." So again, just bringing into attachment, and this applies to familial relationships as well. There are earthly mother and earthly father, of course, bless them, and we don't need to rebuke them or anything of that nature. They're simply doing their best. But if we're attached to them, and if we're attached to living under their roof and their ideas, that's not us. There's always going to be some variation that the divine's going to bring us. And so it doesn't mean that we can't align with them. But if that attachment to that alignment deviates away from where the divine is leading us, then we can't truly be a follower. We can't truly walk the Christic path. So same sort of thing, just from a relationship standpoint. And this applies to any relationship. Relationships can be, they can be long relationships. But as soon as that relationship comes in between you following the Christic path where the Christ is leading you, then you have to make a decision. I can't serve two masters. If my master is this relationship over where the Christ is leading me, then I'm not following the way. So he's just making that very clear. And again, like you said, the marching orders in this sense, it's not for the faint of heart.
Right. And in reference to fathers and mothers, this is one of the things that a lot of occult writings do, is that they switch meanings. So before, father and mother had to do with heaven and earth, or manifest and unmanifest. But in this case, there's some inclination that father and mother would have to do with religion and tradition. So those that aren't willing to release the old traditions wouldn't be able to follow the law of the Christ. Because people, are we on 55?
Yeah.
Okay. So those that remain attached to the old way of doing things, it's hard for them to follow the new, because the old legalistic system is against the law of the law of the Christ is not something that can be defined. It's the thing that defines everything else. Whereas the old legal systems, they have definitions for everything, and it's two completely incompatible things. So you can either hold on to legalism or you can hold on to Christ, but you can't have both. And then there is a couple of pictures about the cross, because most people think it's the torture cross, but it's not. So I don't know if you can. I don't know if you can open your Telegram and show the pictures.
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
Yeah, he's just pulling that up. So, did you send it?
Yes, I sent. There we go. 3 of them.
All right.
So this picture that you guys are going to see, this is the earliest Christian symbol, and it's called the storogram, and it's made from the Greek letters, the Greek initials for the word Christ. And that was, so you'd have to look on the internet for the history of this symbol. So this is actually where we get the Christian cross from.
And in this is represented the raising up and then the infinite continuation, or the loop at the top, which is represented within with the chrism oil rising, going through the process, and then coming back down again to be born again and to raise up again. So you continuously do that while you're aligned again, or sort of perpendicularly to the plane of inertia, because it's a magnetic, energetic movement, not a symbol of torture or death. It's you in this process.
All right, so it says, whoever cannot free themselves from their brother and sister, and that would be people that are following the old traditions and following the old religion, and does not bear their cross as I do, is not worthy of me. So the thing about, there's an idea of bad associations spoil useful habits, right? If you want to know who you are, look at the 5 closest people to you, because that's just the law of association. Because we're not just individuals, we're also collective beings. So if you want to achieve a Christic ascension, if you actually want to become a Christic person, then you got to stop hanging around with people that aren't spiritual. If you're hanging around people and these people they're all about religion and their legal system within their religion, or their legal political system, that's just who and what they are, and you're hanging around with them, you're going to become like them. That's how come Christ was always saying that you got to be whole, you got to be one, you got to be almost like a monk and get away from these people. Like the secret to long life is to get away from people. And so that's what Christ is saying is you want to have that essence within you. You want to be worthy to actually be a Christ. Get out of religion. Get out of politics. Get out of all the systems. Because the systems defend themselves.
Did you want to share any more about the images?
Yeah, no, that's it really. It's a very old symbol.
Yeah. All right. And then verse 56, Ieshua said, whoever knows the world discovers a corpse, and whoever discovers a corpse cannot be contained by the world. So whoever knows the world discovers a corpse, and whoever discovers a corpse cannot be contained by the world. So when you recognize, I guess, that living in the external is merely the path, it's a death and decaying path, which it's not a bad thing, but it's we don't live by it. We don't make that our whole being. We don't orient ourselves towards the world. The world is there. So when we see the world for what it is, as the death and decay, then we can't be contained. We can't be trapped by that any longer, that idea. There's no shiny object that Babylon can come and dangle in front of us to lure us back into that, because we see it for what it is.
So this scripture has relevance to the British Admiralty law, because the British Admiralty law, the laws of Babylon, the laws of ancient Egypt as manifest in today's world, assumes that you're dead It's why the judges wear black in the modern courthouse, because it's to respect for the dead. And it's why they ask you to, when the judge walks in, they say, all rise. Right? That's the resurrection, because it's illegal to take money from a dead man. And then they have to put you to sleep. Everyone sit. Right? And so Jesus, or Ieshua, was saying here that if you come to know the world, you understand how this legalistic system works, you realize that it's hiding spiritual ideals behind a fleshly facade. And you realize that the entire system is based off of death, that it's a death worshiping cult. And once you understand that, then you're no longer contained by it. So like if you walk into a courthouse and they ask you for your name, and you're like, well, I don't have a name. I'm not this legal straw man. I'm no longer subject to your law. So you're going to a hearing and the judge is testing you for hearing. He's not hearing the charges against you. He wants to know, can you hear? Are you a Christic entity, or are you just dead like everyone else? Right? So, so this was a legal concept, and this actually defeated the Roman Empire, because the Christians were no longer subject to that legalistic world. They transcended it. The legal system could no longer tell them what was good or bad, but the Christ within their hearts told them what was good or bad. And it was such a massive power that it defeated the entire Roman Empire. Enough Christians manifested into this world that it wasn't sustainable anymore, and it collapsed in on itself. And it's just an incredible, powerful idea. So, and then it's also saying that, because this is also a military concept. So Christ is putting us at odds with the religions of the world, and he's putting us against the traditions of the world. And he's saying that these people, they're dead on their feet. They're zombies, they're NPCs. And once you realize that they're not thinking, then you can no longer be contained by these people.
Yep, exactly. So 57, Ieshua said, the kingdom of the Father is like the man who had some good seed. His enemy came at night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The man would not allow them to pull up the weeds, saying, I fear you might pull up the weed as well. Indeed, at harvest time, the weeds will be conspicuous. They will be pulled up and burned. So, the kingdom of the Father is like the man who had some good seed. His enemy came at night and sowed weeds among the good seed. The man would not allow them to pull up the weeds, saying, I fear you might pull up the weed as well. Indeed, at harvest time, the weeds will be conspicuous, and they will be pulled up and burned. So there's both potentialities within this experience are there. We can become the good seed, the wheat, or we can become the tare. We can become the weed. But there's no, creation doesn't halt the weeds from growing. It doesn't halt the seed process from even spreading. It's there to provide that contrast. However, during harvest, that's where it's obvious. That's the judgment day, the time of separation, where the wheat are separated from the tare, the weeds from the wheat. And the weeds will be pulled up and burned at that point. So yeah, it's very similar to the other instances where you said this, but a very good thing to go over.
Yeah, he's revealing that people, their nature, whether they're genuine Christic entities or not, is going to be revealed by time. So at first it's maybe hard to tell. You know, both people might be claiming to be Christian, but at the end result, they become very conspicuous. So there's this weed that's toxic to eat, but but when both the wheat and the weed, when they're in their juvenile state, they're almost identical. And so you don't want to just go after the weeds because they're so hard to tell apart. But once they come of age, then they look dramatically different, and then you can separate them. So it's the same way with people that are striving to become like the Christ. During the striving period, it's hard to tell who's genuine and who's not, because everyone's making mistakes. But once someone actually achieves that Christic status, then it's very easy to tell. And if someone was just faking it, and someone wasn't really doing the work, and someone they weren't really allowing the Christ into their heart, then it becomes obvious to those that have achieved Christic status. Because the person who's genuinely Christ-like is exerting force on themselves, but the person who's not is trying to exert force on others.
Yeah, this is just another way to talk about ye shall know them by their fruit.
Yep.
You know, through their actions, all will be revealed, not by how they dress themselves or talk about themselves or any of that, but through their being, through their works. So, verse 58, Ieshua said, "Blessed are those who have undergone ordeals. They have entered into life." And that's it. So, again, Ieshua said, "Blessed are those who have undergone ordeals. They have entered into life." So you can't, this is kind of like the parable of the master giving the coins, and one chooses to bury it because he's afraid he's going to lose it. And the others choose to invest it, and they make good fortune. And the master rebukes the one who just buries it. So if we live our life in a sheltered way, afraid of making mistakes or afraid of trying anything because we don't want to mess up or harm ourselves or harm others, then we're dead. We don't truly live. So life is about risk. Life is about taking that leap of faith off into the unknown. So to undergone ordeals, there are going to be ordeals, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be things that come up. But that's the way to learn. That's the way to grow and expand and to truly step into this Christic way. We have to strive in that and not just stay dead and afraid. The ego wants us to stay in that space of safety or perception of safety, you know, where we don't do anything. We're too afraid to step out. Oh, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if I mess up? What if I'm embarrassed? And all of those are self-imposed limitations that keep us locked into that cage, and we never truly live. So yeah, that's that one.
No, that's right. See, someone who has a strong ego, they're afraid to make mistakes because they don't want to tarnish their image. They don't want to reveal to anyone that they're imperfect like everyone else. Plus people that have gone through ordeals have had to rely on the occult father. At some point, like they say, there's no atheist in the foxhole. So if they haven't gone through any tribulation because they're wealthy, or they have status, or they have some other resources, so they rely on that. And sometimes that's enough to carry them through. And because it is, then they never turn toward the actual meaning, because they have enough physical resources to deal with the consequences of their spiritual stupidity. They're never forced to face it. But for those that don't have those resources, they don't have the money, they don't have the political connection, they don't have the status, And so when the tribulation comes, they're kind of, from the material viewpoint, they're kind of screwed. And so then they're forced to turn to the Father. They're forced to pray because they don't have any other options. And then they find, if they do so properly in good faith and humility, then they have a chance to enter into life and become alive. So if your motivations don't spring from heaven, then you aren't really alive. So if you've been through some rough spots in your life, and then you found Jesus inside you, well, then that's a real blessing, and it is certainly worth having gone through some bumps just to get that treasure. I mean, could you imagine having a smooth life and then never knowing Christ, and then you're dead?
Yeah, you
and there's no Christ within you to reincarnate into another life, and it's just the end of your ego.
You never truly lived. So verse 59, Ieshua said, "Look to the living one while you are alive. If you wait until you are dead, you will search in vain for the vision." So this is sort of a continuation of that. So look to the living one, look to the Christ while you are alive. Truly live. If you wait until you're dead, if you wait till death's knocking on your door, you will search in vain for the vision. God is the God of the living, not the dead. So don't delay, don't wait. Don't say, "Oh, I'll do that next week." Do it now. Step into that path. Let that passion guide you to where it's calling. Let that Christ move through you.
So there's two meanings to this verse 59. The first one is, if you're alive, meaning you're searching for the light. Like if a plant is dead, it doesn't move toward the light because it's dead. But if it's living, the plant will bend toward the light. So if you're alive and you're actually searching for the Christ within, do so before you fall back asleep again. Because to be consciously sleeping, you're going throughout your day and you're no longer thinking about spiritual things or spiritual meanings. You're just on autopilot, and you can get stuck in that mode and forget, oh yeah, that's right, I was searching for Christ, right? You're busy with life. So if you have that spark within you and that inclination within you to search for Christ, do so before you fall asleep again. Consciousness, being awake, it's a precious, precious thing. And the second meaning is that you have to establish the connection to the Christ within your heart while you're alive, and that's a skill set that you have to practice while you're physically alive. You have to practice learning how to die, how to let go of your ego, and how to let go of all the physical senses. It's important to practice silence. Christ was one that would always go out into the wilderness and fast and deprive himself of all the physical senses, because he was practicing seeing into the spirit realm. Because the spirit realm is all around us all the time. So how come we can't see it? Because we're blinded by the senses of the physical. You take everything out of the physical realm, and what's left is the spirit realm, right? But we can't see it because we're blinded. And so he is saying, practice seeing spirit things while you're alive, because if you die, like you actually die, then it's too late to, oh man, I should have done the work. Then what happens to you after death happens, because you didn't do the work while you were alive.
Right.
I mean, could you imagine if all your life you're being selfish, right? Or you're being proud, or you're being egotistical, or you're not having mercy to other people, and you're just living that narcissist life. And then you die, and now you're no longer in the cause, now you're in the effect. And it's too late to change your spiritual vector in the direction. So So there's a time factor in place. I think that's 3 different meanings to that one verse.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's how you know it's a spiritual thing.
Right. Yeah, and since we're coming closer to the end, I just wanted to give a prompt and see if anyone has any questions or anything on what we have covered. Want to jump into a discussion at all? We can certainly keep going for another verse or two, but just wanted to give an opportunity if anybody has anything on their mind. Feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you.
Wow, time flies.
Yeah,
Having a good time.
yeah. So we'll do another one. So verse 60, they saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb entering into Judea. He said to his disciples, "What will the man do with the lamb?" They answered, "He will kill it and eat it." He told them, as long as it is alive, he will not eat it, but only if he kills it and it becomes a cadaver. They said, "He cannot do otherwise." He told them, "Seek a place in repose. Do not become cadavers, lest you be eaten." So,
well, that's not cryptic.
Yeah, yeah, but this is it's kind of calling the flesh eaters for what they are, eating the cadaver. So they saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb enter into Judea. What will the man do with the lamb? He will kill it and eat it. He told them, as long as it is alive, he will not eat it, but only if he kills it and becomes a cadaver. Yeah.
All right. So you gotta have a little historical knowledge. So the Samaritans, where did the Samaritans come from? So originally there were 12 tribes of Israel, and 10 of them became apostate and left the Mosaic law. And because they did that, Yahweh allowed the Assyrians to come in and wipe them out. And the Assyrians, those that survived, the Assyrians dispersed them among the nations of the earth, and they ceased to be a people. And then the Assyrians brought in people from other lands, we don't know who, and they brought them into the land of Israel, and they made them reside where the 10 tribes used to live. And then these people, not knowing anything about Yahweh, not knowing anything about the Mosaic law, were worshiping their own gods in the land. And this pissed off Yahweh, and he started to kill them. So they sent representatives to the 2 tribes, the tribes of Judah, and they said, "Listen, your God's killing us, and we don't know how to worship him, so what do we do?" So the Judeans taught these Samaritans how to worship Yahweh. And so the Samaritans did. They started worshiping Yahweh, but in a limited sort of way. And then Yahweh said, "Okay, fine. You get an A for an effort," and he stopped killing them. And these are the Samaritans that the Jews looked down on. So the Samaritans were also waiting for Christ. They knew who Christ was. They had the Mosaic law, but they weren't really Israelites. They were like stepchildren. So the occultic meaning of what does it mean to be a Samaritan, it means that you only have a little bit of the scriptures in you. Okay? But the lamb is the truth, right? The lamb was the symbol for Christ. So he's saying, I see a guy and he only has a little bit of the truth, but he does have it, and he enters into Judea. What is that person going to do with the truth that's in his heart? And everyone's saying, well, he's going to kill it and eat it. And what that means is that he's going to apply his own knowledge to it, and then he's going to stop and he's going to consume it. And he's going to make a little bastardized hybrid religion of Christianity. And he's saying, okay, maybe, but as long as the truth in his heart is alive, then it will continue to, he's not going to kill it, but the truth is going to become alive in his heart, and it will continue to motivate him along the path of Christ. But if he kills it and it becomes dead, then it's just a dead religion, because you have spirituality, Christic spirituality, which is alive, and then you have religion, which is dead. Once you take spirit and you systemize it, And once you take the undefinable spirit and you stick it and force it into a definition, then it's dead. While it's undefinable and alive, it can change the world. It can do anything. So we shouldn't take the spirit and kill it with our own teachings. Obviously, we teach and we have to teach with words, but our words are not actually the truth. This is something that I've said over and over. Like, I'm saying stuff, but I'm only like trying to point you in direction of this city that has no name. We can never actually arrive there. We can only get closer. Love is not definable. It's the thing that defines everything else. And this is what Christ is saying, is that as long as you have love in your heart and you don't try to put it in a box, it stays alive and can continue to push you toward the Father. So he says, seek a place in tranquility and don't become dead. Don't kill the spirit in you, because if you kill the spirit in you and you turn it into a religion, then the religion will eat you. Mm-hmm. Because your origin's always your destination. So whatever you do, don't start from a position of religion. Start from a position of spirit.
Yeah, don't put yourself on a pedestal as if you have it all figured out and defined, and write all this down in that way, because then you become a cadaver that will be eaten. You know, the pedestal is death.
Yeah, that's because he's at war with religion, and he's saying, don't start a religion. He has said it probably like a dozen times in this one book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. All right, so verse 61, this might be the last one. Ieshua said, 2 will lie on a single bed. One will die, the other will live. Salome asked him, who are you, sir? Where do you come from, you who lie on my bed and eat at my table? Ieshua replied, I come from the one who is openness. What comes from my Father has been given to me. Salome answered, I am your disciple. Ieshua told her, that is why I say that when disciples are open, they are filled with light. When they are divided, they are filled with darkness. Two will lie on a single bed. So this would be the persona, the character, and the spirit. They lie together. One will die, the character will die, the other will live. And then yeah, does that sound about right?
So the single bed is the teachings of Christ. So Christ is introducing, or he's reintroducing the ancient ways, because Christ was not the inventor of this teachings. This teaching springs out of infinite past, and so he was bringing this back that was hidden. He's bringing it back out into the open, and now he's giving it to the world through his disciples. And many people would accept the teachings of Christ. So they're all in the single bed of Christianity. However, some of them would kill the teaching, and others would let it be alive within them. And so this is a continuation of the verse before. This is all a single conversation. So he keeps saying the same thing from different ways, trying to get through to the minds of these children, his disciples around them. So 2 is going to be in the single bed, Christianity. They've all got the same teaching. They've all heard the same words. However, one's going to kill it and one's going to feed it. And so we always want to be feeding the Christ within the heart. You don't want to ever stop feeding it, because your life is dependent upon you feeding the Christ within you. And so some people are going to call themselves Christians, but they're not really giving attention to the Christ within their heart. And so because they allow the Christ within to die, then they're going to die. And then So Salome, then her mind's kind of blown, and she says, "Who are you? Because where do you come from, you who lie on my bed and eat at my table?" So, um, so he says that I'm the one that exists from the undivided, or I'm the one from who is openness. So this kind of starts. He's re-expressing what he said all the way at the beginning of this gospel. When there's just the one and now there's the two, what are you going to do? Right? So he's saying that he comes from the unity within, and everything that he says comes from the viewpoint of the unity within. So he is speaking out from the occult, the heaven, that which is unmanifest. And everything that he's giving to his disciples is coming from there. He's not speaking from the viewpoint of the material realm.
All right. Yeah, that makes sense. Is that the end of the verse?
I
think so.
61.
All right, we'll do another one. So verse 62 says, Ieshua said, I reveal my mysteries to those who become worthy. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So this could be seen as the left and right hemispheres, the head and the heart. The left is going to represent the mind, the head, the left hemisphere, the thinking, analytical, the ego resides there. So don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And that the right hand, the righteous path is dominant, and the left will always try and, or could potentially try and knock it down. So,
well, see, false Christians aren't Christ, whereas true Christians are Christ. And so he's saying that, his teachings can go out into the world, but some people are going to be worthy. They become worthy. So first they're just following the shallow materialistic teachings of Christ, but then something happens, right? They go through some sort of tribulation and some sort of spark. They're chosen, they're elected, and all of a sudden the spirit within them becomes alive. And while they're alive, they had better take action on it before that opportunity pass. And so they become worthy. And then now that they've become worthy and you recognize, oh, hey, look, this person's awake and I'm a Christ and they're a Christ. And so now you can discuss the finer mysteries. Now together you can explore the occult teachings of Christ and explore heaven and explore the spirit realm. And you get to have that pleasure. But just because someone calls themselves a Christian doesn't mean that the Christ is actually active within them. And it doesn't mean that they're Christ. It just means that there's someone who calls himself Christian. And these people are dangerous.
Yeah.
Because they're dead.
Right.
And the dead are dangerous. So he's saying these are all part of the marching orders. We're all soldiers here. Make sure that the man next to you actually really is a Christic soldier.
Right.
Because you're either fighting for earth or you're fighting for heaven.
Right. Yeah, and they have to be worthy to hear it, because if they're not, then you're putting a target on your back unnecessarily, essentially.
Right. Because if the evil in them recognizes the Christ in you, they'll attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which is why a lot of the operations, the Christic operations, have had to be quite secretive.
That's exactly what we're seeing nowadays, is that they're not telling the right hand what the left hand is doing.
Yeah. Or the left hand.
Or the left hand what the right hand's doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a good ending point for today.
Has it really been 2 hours?
Almost, yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It feels like half an hour. This was a good one.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this lesson.
Yeah, this was really good. Yeah, just want to give opportunity again to see if anybody wants to jump in with any sort of closing comments or things of that nature. No worries if not. It's been a very, very rich experience today, for sure. A lot of rich verses, as this whole book has been. Yeah, did you have any closing comments or things you want to leave us with?
Thank you for having me here.
Of course, yeah.
And for letting me participate in this process. This book is just about my favorite book now.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that you are here. It's very helpful because while there are some that are more obvious, there are some that are just require a bit more depth. So I really appreciate that.
Well, you're very welcome. It's kind of you to say.
And yeah, thank you all for being here, for listening on, and we will continue this. We're just about a little over halfway through the verses. I think there are 114 verses. So just to give an idea at how many more episodes we might have. If we go at this rate, it'll probably be 7 or 8 in total.
And we're not dawdling. We're moving at a good speed.
But yeah, there's just a lot to it, and no need to rush it. So yeah, hope everyone has a wonderful day, evening, wherever you are. Thank you for being with us. Sending out love as always. Take care, everybody. See you next time.